So there's always been this big debate online about what generation of Pokemon games are the best. While every side has some pretty loud supporters, the most provocative of them is probably the dreaded Gen 1er, a mocking term made up for people who feel that Pokemon has gone steeply downhill since the days of Red, Blue, and Yellow. I'll be frank here. Generation 1 was a mess. I'd love for people to take off their rose-tinted glasses and actually analyze some of the mechanics of the original games. Anyone remember the Psychic type and how ludicrous it was that generation? Only one type resisted it, the Psychic type itself, meaning your only real resistance against the Psychic type was another Psychic type. It had one weakness, the then laughable Bug type. It was so broken, Gold and Silver brought in two different types just to combat it. Steel resisted Psychic, and Dark was immune to it. They also changed it so that Ghost went from doing no damage to Psychic types to being super effective against it. When Gen 2 came out, the entire metagame seemed to have been balanced around the absurd power that Psychic Pokemon brought to the field. Speaking of Ghost types, know how many moves were Ghost type in Generation 1? 3. Of those, Confuse Ray did no damage, Nightshade dealt damage according to the level of your Pokemon and ignored things such as Stab, leaving only Lick as an actual ghost attack. Lick did a measly 30 damage and at the time was considered a physical attack. The only ghost type family was the Ghastly line, meaning Gengar was the only viable ghost in the metagame. Gengar had an attack of 65 and a special of 130, twice that. So the only traditional damage move for ghost types was quite literally awful for the only intended user in virtually every way. But that's not even the worst example. Dragon types. Just dragon types. The only dragon type move in Generation 1 was Dragon Rage, which dealt a simple 40 damage regardless of modifiers. Dragon type Pokemon were supposed to be weak to attacks of their own type, but as the only attack dealt set damage, the Dragon/Dragon weakness was literally coded into the game for nothing. Similarly to the Ghost example, there was also only one Dragon family, so you would only be seeing Dragonite as a viable Dragon Pokemon. Another thing people argue about is Pokemon designs. Every time people get into an argument about the best gen, there is inevitably people who complain about the ice cream cones, key rings, gears, and piles of trash that make up Gen 5 and 6 Pokemon. Let's analyze some of the Generation 1 Pokemon though. Look, it's a Diglett. It's a very minimalistic interpretation of a mole. Not much to it, but as a Pokemon it's an effective design. When it evolves, it becomes 3 of itself. That is literally the only difference in design. Doduo is a double-headed bird that evolves into a triple-headed bird. Magnemite is a floating magnet eyeball that evolves into 3 magnet eyeballs that have been screwed together. Coughing evolves into wheezing by growing big and having a weird tumor head of itself attached to its side. This lazy form of creating evolutions rarely happens in the other gens. Outside of that, we have the brilliant ideas of a bunch of angry eggs in various states of being cracked that evolve into a palm tree of eggs. There's a pile of sludge that evolves into a bigger pile of sludge. And finally, Voltorb and Electrode. First off, there's a horribly missed opportunity with these Pokemon. Voltorb looks like a Pokeball, so why doesn't Electrode look like a Great, Ultra, or Master Ball? Had they gone with this, then we could have had shiny versions of these Pokemon filling out the other Pokeball types. Instead, Electrode is a Pokeball upside down. And ignoring all of that, why are they Pokeballs? The entire idea behind the family is that they have a tendency of exploding if they are startled. So they are in a form that is known for holding rare items, thus increasing the chance of them having to blow themselves up. Nothing about these guys makes sense. Nothing. Every generation since the first has added loads to the Pokemon metagame, and most of it has been for the better. Compared to Gen 1, Gen 2 added in held items, fixed the type chart so well it didn't need balancing for 4 generations and 14 years, and doubled the amount of land you traveled on. Generation 3 added in abilities, natures, double battles, and refined the EV and IV systems. Generation 4 finally added in the physical/special split for all normal damaging moves in the game. Generation 5 introduced hidden abilities, and Generation 6 made the fairy type to balance dragons as well as introducing Mega Evolution. To conclude, the original generation of Pokemon games were horribly balanced, seemed only half finished or were poorly planned out, and were rife with glitches and other problems. Generation 2 especially seemed to have been built around cleaning up the game's various messes, and every generation preceding it have helped balance or add to the overall game experience.